Hello everyone, welcome to A1 Tutor live class. Right away we are going to be having the physics class, and today we are taking another topic which is friction. We are taking another topic which is what? Friction. And as you can see on the screen, there are some of the examples of friction which we are related with. They are daily things we do, daily activities. Have you asked yourself before, why is the car moving on the road, and when you actually make use of the brake, the car stopped? The concept behind it is the concept of what? Friction. Or frictions enables the car to stop when you make use of the brake. Why is walking possible? Why is walking on the road possible? It is also a concept that deals with what? Friction. It's also a concept that deals with friction. Even up to writing. Why is writing possible? Is because of friction. All right. So all these examples are examples that explain friction. Now, before we're going to start today, I just want us to do an activity. When we explain friction, there's a common activity that all of us can do and actually be able to understand what friction is all about. Friction has to do with two bodies in contact going in opposite movement. Are you getting it? Two bodies in contact trying to have a force of result of trying to have a force of resistance because they are both going in opposite direction. Now these are my palms, right? If I'm going to rub this palm, you can see the movement of my hand. If I continue like this for a while, I'm going to experience what we call friction. And that is going to be evidenced by making use of my palm. Check on my cheeks. My palm will be very hot. Now, if you notice, the hands were moving in opposite direction, and they were both in contact. So things that you have to know about friction is that two bodies must be in contact. All right, two bodies must be in contact, and they have to move in opposite direction for friction to take place. They have to move in opposite direction for friction to take place. So these examples here, the first one here, walking is possible because of friction. Driving a car, when you apply the brake, the car stops, right? It is also possible because of friction. When you are writing, also friction is when you are what? Braking a bicycle. Braking a bicycle, that is applying brake to your bicycle. It also has to do with what? Friction, rubbing of hands. That was what I did initially as the activities I was showing to you. Rubbing of hands also has to do with what? Friction. Climbing the hill is also a real life example that deals with what? Friction. Lightning a match. Lightning a match also has to do with friction. Playing sports also has to do with friction. Also, this game, skimming, also have to do with what? Friction. Opening of a what? Of a jar also have to do with friction. So all these examples are examples that are related to us. I said it that friction has to do with two bodies in contact. There must be a contact between the two bodies, and both bodies will be moving in opposite direction. Then friction will take place. Then friction will take place. Now let's start today's class with a definition of friction. With a definition of friction. If you can hear me, please kindly signify by giving a thumbs up. All right. If you can hear me, signify by giving a thumbs up. Okay, let's move on to today's business. We'll start with the definition of friction. With the definition of friction. All right, stop presenting this. Let's move on to our board. Today we said we are treating friction as a topic. friction. All right. Okay. For our YouTube followers, please, if this is the first time that you are watching our video, please take time and click on the subscribe buttons for you to have notifications of our latest video. Click on the subscribe button and get notifications of our latest video. Thank you. Okay, today we said we are discussing friction as a topic. I want to get what friction is all about by taking a definition of friction. We want to define what friction is. Definition of friction. Definition of friction. Okay, friction is defined as the force that resists two motions friction is defined as the force that resists the motion of one object that resists the motion of one object, against another. The motion of one object against another. Friction is defined as the force that resists the motion of one object against another. If you check your charts, I've sent some pictures to the chart for us to be using today. So please, if you have access to the pictures, please kindly signify with thumbs up. If I need to resend them so I can do that, kindly signify if you have access to the pictures sent to you. Okay, thank you. Now we are talking about friction today, and we said it is the force that resists the motion of one object against another. Now take note, I said earlier that when we are talking about friction, two things have to be involved. One, they have to be in contact. The two objects have to be in contact. Two, they move in opposite direction. Move in opposite direction. They move in opposite direction. Like the example I cited the other time, they move in opposite direction. Now, if I rub my palms like this, you can see that the movement of the palm is not in the same direction. And another point is that the two palms are together, so they're in contact. So this alone is a practical way to prove that frictions happens. Okay, if I continually rub the hand like this, I'll feel that the hands is having a kind of hot temperature. And that is as a result of what? Friction. So in friction, there's a force that acts against motion. You know, motion has to do with a movement in one particular direction, but the force that acts over that motion is what we call the frictional force. The force that acts against motion is called the frictional force. All right, let's take a diagram to explain. Let's explain that using a diagram. Okay, back to our examples of friction that we have. Back to example of friction that we have. Now, walking. Walking as an example. Why is walking possible? Now, check. If you check the down of your shoe, they are always having a rough surface. All right? The surface of your shoe is always rough. And the ground which you are marching on also has a kind of rough surface. Now, you marching on the ground, the surface of your shoe has a kind of opposite movement, or let me say an opposite motion that happens between the surface of the shoe and the ground, which leads to walking possible. Because imagine if the down of your shoe is smooth, okay? If the down of your shoe is smooth and you are walking on a smooth surface, what you are going to discover is that you are going to be falling almost all the time, right? And that is why on the slippery surface of land, if you are not putting on your shoe, you tend to fall. And if you are putting on a shoe that is not that rough, that the surface of the shoe is not that rough, you are also likely to what? To experience falling. Why? Because the surface of your shoe has to be rough to make movement possible. I believe you are getting that. So if you check almost all the shoes you are wearing, some of it have a rough surface, okay? Some of it have a rough surface, and it's to enable walking, because that rough surface is needed for friction to take place, because friction helps us to walk on the surface of the earth. So if you have a smooth surface and you are putting on a shoe with a smooth surface, you are likely to what? To fall, because at that moment friction might not take place. There will not be an opposition between the two bodies contact, which is your shoe and the earth, or your shoe and the surface of the what? Of the ground. So there must be an opposition, a force that will oppose each other for walking to be possible. I believe that's clear to us. Now coming to driving also, if you are very conversant with the road, you will notice that the road is not as smooth as we think. All right? The road is not as smooth as we think. Now, leaving the road and focusing on the tire. Have you ever seen a car with a very smooth surface of tire? If yes, please kindly signify. Have you ever seen a car that has a very smooth surface of tire? Like the surface of the tire is very smooth. What you discover is that the surface of the tire is always what? Rough. Okay? And it is rough so as to enable friction to take place whenever you apply the brake. Okay? So the surface of the tire is actually in contact with the surface of the road. So when you apply brake, what actually makes it to stop is how the tire looks like. So if your tire is not rough enough, friction might not actually take place. And for the car to stop, it might take a longer period of time. So you see why the tires are being designed that way. It is to enable brake to function through friction. I believe you understand that. If yes, please kindly signify as we proceed. If you understand that concept I just explained with the two examples, please kindly signify. I'm waiting for your response. Kindly signify. We are moving on. If you understand the concept that we just explained concerning working and applying brake while driving, please kindly signify. The same thing is applicable to that of the bicycle. Yes, the tire of the bicycle also has been designed to have a rough surface so as to enable friction to take place also. So as to enable friction to take place. Okay, now let's proceed with our work. Let's proceed. So we'll stop presenting this. Now back to the definition. Now what you can actually take note of is that for friction to take place, we must have the bodies to be in contact, and also they work in opposite directions. All right, they work in opposite direction. So friction is that force, okay, that resists the motion of one object against the another object, against another object. I believe that is clear to us. If yes, please signify. We are moving on to the types of friction that we have. All right, let's move on to types of friction. Types of friction. Types of friction. We have 4 types of friction. Types of friction. We have 4 types of friction, 1 and 2, then we'll take the remaining 2 after treating this. The first type of friction is the static friction. The what? The static friction. Now in this picture, we have a man trying to push a car that is not in motion. The car is not in motion, that is, the car is static. The car is static. And the man is trying to push the car. Now, what you're going to observe is that as the man is trying to push this car, the car also is trying to move backward. So, two bodies in contact, the man and the car, moving in opposite direction. And that kind of scenario is what we call a static friction. Why? Because the car is not in motion. The car is not in motion. The car is not in motion. As the man pushes the car to this direction, the car also moves backward like this. Okay? Because the car is not in motion, actually nobody is inside the car driving it, and the car is static. So the man is trying to push it forcefully, and as he's trying to apply forces, there's another force also coming from the car. You know, the car has a weight. So if it's having a weight, definitely it's having a force. All right. Weight is measured in Newton. So force is measured in Newton. So the weight of the car also will be equivalent to the force that will be pushing the man also against that motion that is trying to what? Perform. So the opposite movement of those two entities, which is the car and the man, is what we call a static friction. A static friction. Now, what is a kinetic friction? It has to do with a friction in motion. Here, the object is static. Here, the object is in motion. Okay, the object is in motion. I believe we have seen this kind of sport activities before. So this kind of sport activities also is a good example of what we call the kinetic friction. There will be a force that is moving against the motion. The motion of this man is that he's trying to move towards this direction, and there is another force that is also moving against him. Okay, there's another force that is trying to move against him. So we have two opposite forces acting or trying to resist. There's a force trying to resist the motion of this man. And such type of friction is called the kinetic friction because it is a friction that happens in motion. A friction that happens in motion. All right? I believe that is clear to us. Shall we move to the next one? We have the rolling friction. The rolling friction. Another type of friction, number 3, is the rolling friction. It has to do with the friction that has to do with a rolling motion. Okay? And a perfect example that was used is the bicycle. Another example that can be used is the car, the vehicle tire. Okay, if you check the wheel or the tire of a vehicle, it also performs that rolling. It also performs that rolling. Okay, so we have force applied to move to this direction, but frictions act against that direction. The way you are pedaling your bicycle is to, what you are doing is actually you are applying energy or you are applying force to move to this direction, while there will be a force that will be going against that direction, and that force is called the what? The friction. Now the friction is acting not on you but on this tire, and that is why we call it a rolling friction. Okay, the friction that acts against a movement that has to do with rolling. Okay, that friction is said to be a rolling friction. So we have that example also in the wheel or the tire of a car. Yes, we have that also in it. Okay, so that kind of friction is called rolling friction, because it deals mostly with the object that rolls, the object that what? That rolls. Okay, so that is called the rolling friction, and I want to actually cite an example of that rolling friction. It has its own application. Now look at this image here, having a wheel. Now this wheel here performs a rolling friction. It performs a what? A rolling friction. Okay, it performs a rolling friction. So this is one application of a rolling friction. You're traveling back, okay, that you try to drag on the what? On the floor. It rolls also. Okay, so what we have there is a rolling friction. Is a rolling friction. Let's go back to the next type of friction after rolling. We have the next one. I said we have 4 types of friction. The next type of friction is the fluid friction. Fluid. The fluid friction. The fluid friction is a type of friction that occur in both liquid and gases. So the frictions that occur in liquid, for example, someone that is swimming in the pool is also experiencing friction, and that friction is the friction is experiencing is called the fluid friction. But it does not only happen in liquid; it also happens in what? Gases. Now, the direction of this person swimming is this direction, and there's a force that is acting against him in this direction. Is moving in this direction, there's another force resisting that motion of the direction where he's facing. And that force is nothing but a frictional force. So when you are swimming, the reason why you are trying to strive to keep moving is because there's another force that is resisting that motion of your movement. And that force is what we call the what? The frictional force. And that type of friction is called the fluid friction. The fluid friction. I believe that is clear to us. The fluid friction. So these are the 4 types of friction that we have. We have the static friction, the kinetic friction, the rolling friction, and the fluid friction. I believe that's clear to us. If yes, please thumbs up. We are moving on to the next. Okay, thanks for your response. Permit me to wipe the board while we take the next. Okay, now let's consider what we call the applications of friction. Let's consider the advantages and the disadvantages of friction. The advantages and disadvantages of friction. Friction has its own advantage and also has its disadvantage. Advantages and disadvantages of friction. Advantages. Friction provides grip to our feet. Friction provides grip to our feet while walking, as the area of contact between our feet and the ground produces friction that helps us to maintain a firm grip to prevent falling or slipping. Okay, so one advantage of friction is that it enables us to walk. So why we are walking is because friction is existing. Are you getting it? So one good advantage of friction is that it enables us to walk by providing us with a grip. It provides us with a grip while walking. The friction provides us with a grip what? While walking. Imagine if there's no friction. What will be happening is what? Falling and slipping. Okay? So friction makes walking possible. Friction makes walking possible. Another advantage of friction is vehicles move on the road easily due to rolling friction. Our vehicles move easily on the road due to rolling friction. So if friction was not existing, vehicles will not be moving easily. It will be so hard for vehicles to move. So vehicles also move on the roads smoothly and easily because of rolling friction. So that's another advantage of friction. It makes vehicles to move easily on the road. While cycling or driving, applying brakes produces friction that makes the vehicle or the bicycle to stop. While driving or while cycling and we apply brakes, the brake is actually working because of friction. Are you getting it? So if friction does not take place, the brake will not actually work effectively. Are you getting that? So friction makes our bicycle to stop when we apply the brake, and friction makes the car also to stop when we apply the brake. And what does it prevent? It prevents accidents. Okay, it prevents accidents. Imagine us driving car without brake. What could have happened? That could have led to so many accidents within our environment. So friction has prevented accidents to be taking place. Friction that happens in the process of applying brake has bring a kind of reductions or um, a kind of decrease in the number of accidents that we have in our environment. All right. So that's another importance or advantage of friction. Friction helps us to write on a paper as it enables the pen to write properly instead of slipping. Instead of what? Slipping. Even while writing, frictions also enables us to write properly. So even when we are going to school and we are writing, we are also experiencing friction. The reason why it is easy for you to write with your pen on your book is because friction is taking place between the pen and the book. And you know, both of them will be in contact, all right? Both of them will be in contact. And there will be a force of resistance that will be what experienced between the pen and the book, which makes writing possible. So it's another advantage of what? Friction. Writing is possible because frictions take place. Our frictions help us to light up the matches as it produces the heat that makes it possible. When you light your matches, what you're actually doing is friction. The matches will not light up if friction does not take place. So the friction brings about the lighting. The frictions that happen between the matches, the box of the matches, and the piece of the matches, the force that happened between them, that is the resistance force between both of them, brings about that lightning, brings about that what? That light up. So frictions also make the matches that we use in the kitchen to what? To light up. So it's another importance of friction, even right in the kitchen. So if there's no friction, how do you want to cook? If you cannot light your matches. Are you getting that? So that is another advantage. Then friction allows sticking nails inside the wall. When you hit the hammer upon the head of a nail, what happened there is friction. And that is why it keeps going inside and inside the wall or the wood. Okay? So frictions also allows the nail allows the nails to what to go inside the wall. Because while you are hitting the hammer on the nail, there's a friction that takes place between the nail and the hammer, which enables the nail to go inside or to be what? To be entering the what? The wall. So frictions also takes place in that scenario. I believe the advantages of frictions are clear to us. So you can see that we actually experience friction almost every day. Almost every day. I believe that's clear to us. Let's move on to this disadvantage of what? Friction. Where friction requires a lot of energy. Therefore, wastage of energy is common, is the common use. It is wastage of energy is the common cause because without applying energy, we can't slide the object. Now we are talking about the disadvantage of friction. It actually leads to wastage of energy. Now look at the first diagram I showed you where a man was trying to push a car. Do you know the kind of energy the man would have exhausted? So it allows the wastage of energy. The wastage of energy. Frictions requires a lot of energy for it to take place. So it leads to what? The wastage of energy. Friction also increases fuel consumption for vehicles to maintain energy loss due to friction. It leads to increase in fuel consumption for vehicles. It leads in what? In increase. It leads to increase in fuel consumption for vehicles. Because when you are actually driving and the car, you need to press the accelerator for you to move very fast. And when you do that, it actually where you feel it the more is on the fuel. Okay, where you feel it the more is on the fuel because the more you are pressing the accelerator, you are trying to go against the force of resistance, which is friction. And when you are doing that, you are exhausting or you are actually wasting energy, which is the fuel in the car, which is the fuel in the car. So friction also leads to the increase of fuel consumption. Okay, the more you want to go faster on the road, the more you are consuming fuels. The more you are consuming fuels. All right, and that is why you will see most of the time people that are driving, if they are on a sloping land, especially the bikemen, when they're on a sloping land, they tend to off the engine of the bike just to slope, just to have a kind of what a free movement. Because the more they try to make use of the accelerator, they are consuming fuel. They are consuming fuel. So friction leads to the increase in fuel consumption. And if there is increase in fuel consumption, of course, it's going to lead to loss of energy. The more you make use of your fuel, the more or the lesser the energy of the what of the car. All right. So that is one disadvantage. Sometimes excessive production of heat due to friction damages the machine parts. Frictions happens in machine because two objects are gliding against each other, and if there is excessive friction, it can actually lead to the damage of the machine because there will be overheating. There will be a lot of heat, and if heat is too much, what will happen is that the part of the machine will run out. Okay, it will run out. So what happens when there's increase in friction in a machine is that it leads to the part of the machine to get damaged or to run out, because anything that has to do with overheating will definitely lead to run out of the part of that particular machine. Friction encourage noise pollution. Yes, frictions encourages noise pollution. Friction encourages noise pollution. If you are very conversant with cars, some cars that don't have good engines, when they are trying to move their car by pressing the accelerator, you hear some sound like trying to forcefully move. So that thing that is actually giving the sound is because of friction that is happening in the car. You know, in the car, the engine has different components and they are gliding on each other. They are gliding on each other. So the more the man is trying to move with a faster speed, because of friction, it starts giving a sound. If you ever seen where Ferrari is on the road moving, there's a sound it gives. Boom! That sound is because there is a gliding inside the engine, and that gliding causes friction. And what it actually brings outside is noise pollution. Is what? A noise pollution. So that is another disadvantage. It contributes to noise pollution. Frictions destroy the sole of a shoe and the tire of a car. Yes. No matter how your shoe seems to be very new, if you check the underneath of it, you will notice that because of friction, some part of your shoe are actually reducing in probably let me say in thickness. Yes, let me say it that way, in thickness. If you walk, trek, check under your shoe. If you are seeing something funny there, like your shoe is actually degrading, it is not because of anything, it's because of friction. So you keep changing your shoe on probably monthly basis or yearly basis because of friction. So if friction was not happening, your shoe can be like that for a long period of time and you don't need to change anything. So one disadvantage is that even though it helps us to walk, it makes walking possible. Another disadvantage is that it leads to the gradual destruction of the shoe. It leads to the gradual destruction of the shoe and that of the tire of a vehicle also. Yes, that of the tire of a vehicle. If you see it, a vehicle that has been in use for a long period of time, you tend to see the tire that it kind of look more smooth. It is because the tire have been working on the road for a long period of time and it has not been changed. So the rough surface that has been designed to be on the tire, the friction has made it to become like a smooth surface of tire. So you need to change because if you do not change, you will not enjoy using the vehicle anymore. So disadvantage of friction, it leads to the gradual destruction of our shoes or that of the vehicle, that of the tire of the vehicle. Sometimes frictions injures our ligaments and bones as we struck at a highly frictional surface that affects our ligament and bone while running or walking. This one is practical. Everybody have experienced it. Have you ever been walking and mistakenly you hit your hand or something? You feel a sensation in your bone. That is as a result of friction. That is as a result of what? Friction. At that moment, you feel that pain. So you can actually injure yourself like that if that thing was seriously more than expected. So when you hit your body, part of your body, especially all these joints, the nail and the other part of the joints, when you hit it on a particular object, a very strong object, you feel a sensation, and that can actually damage your ligaments. It can damage your ligaments. What I mean by ligament is that your bones are being joined together by that ligament. So friction also causes injury to the ligaments and to the bone. Friction also causes what? Injury to the ligament and the bone. I believe we are good to go. I believe you understand the advantage and disadvantage of friction. If you are asked in your exams, you don't actually need to cram it. You just have to understand that is what you experience on daily basis. And you put it in your own words. And you put it in your own way. So you have to be conversant with these advantages and disadvantages. You can be asked in UTME. All of the following are disadvantages of friction, except so you need to understand each of the points given to you. I believe that is clear. If friction is clear to us, the advantage and disadvantage of friction is clear to us, please, I need your reactions as we are moving on to the method of reducing friction. Okay, thank you. Let's take a pause Okay, for those people that are watching us on YouTube, please, this is the right time for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel to have more of our tutorials, to have more of our live sessions classes on YouTube. You need to get updates and you need to get notified. And if you want that to be easier, you just need to click on the subscribe button. And also, do not forget to like our video and also share with friends. Thank you. Now, let's move on to the method of reducing friction. The method of reducing friction. The method of reducing friction. So we are going to make use of our picture for that also. The method of reducing friction. Method of reducing friction. Okay, the first method of reducing friction is by applying lubricants. By applying lubricants. You know what we call lubricants? That is what we call oil. Even in the engine of your generator, you apply oil because the generator works through a mechanical way, a mechanical process. And while that is going on, we need oil to facilitate the movement of those components in the engine. So your bicycle also, to make it have a very reduced form of friction, all you need to do is to apply lubricants. So lubricants reduces friction. Number two, applying oil, like I said, sometimes it's very hard to open your door because those metals that joins the door to the wall, okay, are actually rusting and it's very hard to open it. So if you want to actually reduce the friction, what you need to do is to apply oil, is to apply the oil on those surface and it will reduce friction. You can't terminate friction totally, but you can reduce it. You cannot eliminate friction totally, but you can actually reduce friction. Another one is polishing surface. Yes, this is actually a game in the amusement park where you see small children sliding on it. Now, imagine if this surface was not polished and it was a rough surface. Do you think it's going to be easier for the children to slide on that surface? No, it will not be easier. So as a result of polishing that surface, it has reduced the rate of friction. And that is why it is easy for the children to slide. And while they are even sliding, what they are experiencing is what we call the sliding friction. Yes, that's another type of friction. We call it the sliding. We call it the sliding friction. The sliding friction. And this here is a good example of a sliding friction. So when you polish a surface, you actually also reduce the friction. Another way of reducing friction is by adding wheels. By adding what? Wheels. Okay? If this bag, or let me say this traveling bag, was not having wheels, do you think it's going to be easy to drag it on the road or drag it on the floor? It's not going to be easy. Okay? So you have to add wheels, and those wheels are what we call rolls. Okay? They are rollers that makes movement of an object easier. That makes movement of an object easier. So by adding wheels, by polishing a surface, by adding lubricants, by applying oil, we can reduce friction. We can reduce friction. All right. I believe that is clear to us. If yes, please let's signify. Now we want to take one or two questions on friction. One or two questions on friction. One or two questions on friction. If it is clear to us, please let's signify. We are moving to calculation on friction. I want to take one or two questions on friction. Okay. We want to take some questions on friction. Calculation on friction. The the first question, let's take the first question. A car moving, a car moving, a car moving of mass 800 kilogram experiences a frictional force, a car moving experiences a frictional force of 200 Newton if it accelerates at 2 meter per second, calculate the magnitude of the force, calculate the magnitude of the force applied, to the car. Calculate the magnitude of the force applied to the car. So these are questions that we want to solve. We want to solve this question. So we need to first identify the parameters in the question. We need to identify the parameters in the question. We are given mass. Mass of the car is 800 kilogram. And also we are given the acceleration of the car, that is A equals to 2 meter per second square. All right. And also we are given the frictional force, which is FR. Frictional force is 200 Newton. And we are asked to find the force applied. The force applied is P. Force applied is represented by letter P. Force applied. Now take note that force applied, which is P, is equals to the frictional force plus force. The frictional force plus force. The frictional force plus force. Now, we need to get the resultant force. This is the frictional force, which is FR. Frictional force, FR. This one is going to be the resultant. We need to write it in full. This is frictional. Let me say RI, frictional. Then this is resultant force, RE. So we have to get the what? The resultant force. Already we have the frictional force. This is the frictional force. But we are not given the what? The resultant force. So to get the resultant force, which is this, we said the resultant force, the resultant force equals to mass times acceleration, and mass equals to 800 kilogram multiplied by acceleration, which is 2. So we have 1,600 Newton. 1,600 Newton. Now to get the force applied, we have frictional force plus resultant force. Frictional force is 200 Newton plus 1,600 Newton, and that is 1,800 Newton. So the force applied is 1,800 Newton. I believe this application is clear to us. Please, if yes, kindly react. I want to have your reactions as we are taking the closing for this class. All right. Thanks for your response. Okay, thank you. So please, I will want you guys to practice more questions on frictional force by making use of the A1 Tutor app. Just go to the A1 Tutor app CBT session and click on physics, then you have enough questions to practice. Thank you for your time. Stay online. We are going to have the next class in few minutes time. So please kindly stay online so you won't miss the second class. Thank you and bye.